Travis Campbell in Georgia. I think
No.
that's where you are. It's
I am
so
in Georgia.
good to see you. Yeah. How's
Yeah.
life out there?
Hot.
Yeah.
It was 99 today.
And
Summer's officially with us. Started officially on Friday. So equinox came and went.
Yeah. There's 95 here, but it's pretty dry. It's not like there where you die of dehydration.
The sun goes down here. It's still, you can still see a faint bit of sunlight here at 9:20 p.m. So
wow. Yeah. Okay.
So with time change and all that, in the winter, our sun goes down at like 4:30 to 5.
Yeah.
I mean, it feels like 10 o'clock at night. It's 6 o'clock in the evening, And then in the summer, it really is the opposite. Our days last very long here. It's good.
Everybody's in a trash California mood, but I still think it's the greatest place to live. I love it out here.
And besides the taxes in your political system and your governor, it's awesome.
Oh, and don't forget the traffic. It's really horrible too.
Yeah, but when the government manipulates a COVID outbreak, then your traffic is. I remember talking to you during COVID. I mean, you just were sailing through traffic. I mean, there was no traffic.
It was awesome. Yeah.
Well, you need to pray that the government implements another one of those things.
Yeah, really.
Remember, Ross, it's all about you, not anybody else.
I am the center of the universe.
Yes. Yes, indeed. Until you die, and then you're in trouble.
That's right.
If you have that attitude when you die.
I heard this great phrase the other day. Maybe I've mentioned it to you. It was, I used to think it was really important. I wanted to be like the best in the world at something when I was young, or just be an all-star at something, make my mark. And I heard I think it's one of the early church fathers. You probably know this. He said, the way to do this is to worship God, die, and be forgotten.
That's right.
That's like the pinnacle. And it sounds horrible, but it's not. It's if you're living your life the way we're supposed to in front of God, then there's nothing else. I don't feel compelled to have to do stuff. I guess like I used to. I'm just, I'm kind of a OCD on theology and all this stuff that I'm studying, but I guess that feels to me like that's what I'm supposed to be doing. Anyway,
by the way, my friend, our new pastor, Nathan Bolt, preached a sermon last night. It was a very good sermon on Luke 16, Lazarus and the rich man.
Oh, good.
And he had a lot of great insights. And one of the things that he pointed out, in our culture and even in the first century, the rich were the ones that were remembered. When the wealthy, when the famous die, they have a proper burial. They have all the fanfare. Everybody remembers their good works, the generous things they gave to the city library, or they built the city library, or they built this big hall, Carnegie Hall, and the Rockefeller Center. And I mean, we just have their names are etched in our stone. Trump.
Yeah.
But we don't know the rich man's name in this parable.
We know Lazarus's name.
We know Lazarus's name, and that's the point. He wasn't remembered. And in fact, it says the rich man was buried. Nathan points this out. The rich man is buried. But Lazarus, we don't hear about his burial. He is taken by the angels to Abraham's bosom. And so that's the important thing. Will God remember you? And will your name survive? Everyone's name survives this life. I'm speaking broadly and metaphorically. Your name is remembered in this life, but the real question is it remembered by God in the hereafter?
That's right. Because this isn't what we wanted to do, but this is good, so let's do it.
Well, it's death,
Yeah,
we'll get there.
That's true. From a human standpoint, even from a human standpoint, you can say a big so what? So somebody has a really successful life, and they even help a lot of people, and they live a selfless life, and then they die, and people mourn them, and they're remembered. But if there's no life after death, then so what? The person who died, it doesn't benefit them at all.
Yeah.
So
Death is the great equalizer.
that's
It's,
right. So
as it's been said many times, including by Nathan last night, it's the great equalizer. It's
right. So I want to be careful that I'm trying to lead a life that God wants me to lead, because
yeah.
that's the only thing I can say, that I did. I did that right. If whatever that is.
A while ago, many years ago, a very wealthy man in my community died. And if I were to go around town and ask and bring up his name, no one would remember, except for people above a certain age, say 50-year older or 40-year older. There'd be, oh yeah, I remember him, but they wouldn't know much about him, except for those that were very close to him. Because when he was dying, it was like a circus. His mistress and his wife were fighting over attention. It was just a mess. And so basically, if you go ask the older crowd that knew him fairly well, they're either going to say he was very wealthy, or they're going to say he was a whore hopper.
Yeah.
And for the lay audience, that's an individual who sleeps with prostitutes.
Okay. Yep.
That's basically how he's remembered. And so the question is, do you want to be remembered like that? There's so many lives of famous people that you see on the E! Hollywood Story or whatever. And it was just basically a 40-year stretch of them just seeking out their own hedonistic happiness. That's it. Yeah. That's the end of the story.
See, what I think people miss is it doesn't matter how you remembered after you're dead.
Absolutely.
It doesn't matter. It doesn't affect you. If there's no afterlife, it doesn't affect you. You're going to be dead. There's no consciousness at all. And other people are thinking good things or bad things or whatever they think about you. It doesn't make a difference to you. So what's the difference? Why do any of that stuff if it's not what God wants you to do?
John F. Kennedy said that. When he talked about his philandering, he was like, well, I mean, when I die, I'm not, I don't want it to come out while I'm alive, but once I die, who cares if people find out about it? I won't be around to hear the ridicule or whatever.
Right.
I mean, in a sense, I would say, hey, do I really want to be remembered that way? It's just some person that sought out his own happiness, and that's full stop. And then covered it over with a couple of generous gifts to this charity or whatever. Or do I really care if I'm remembered on this earth, as long as I'm remembered by God? And I want to be Lazarus. I don't want to be the rich man. So
he said eternity in our hearts. I think everybody thinks about it, and I really want to try to serve the Lord in a way that he remembers me. Like you say, is that it doesn't matter what other people think about me. It doesn't affect me when I'm dead. So
if your motives are pure and you're seeking after God, then it honestly does not matter what the in crowd is saying about you. The funny thing about being in the in crowd, as I once was long ago when I was a teenager and growing up.
Well, you're still in my in crowd.
Well, I mean, I will associate myself with some people, and I'll allow you into my company. But when I was living that life as a teenager in high school, all I cared about was what was being said about me. Yeah. I was a slave to the opinions of others. Now I honestly don't care. It can hurt. I mean, if you hear that someone says something mad about you, I mean, it does hurt. But in the long run, it ultimately just doesn't. I know it just ultimately doesn't matter. That's just a person that's throwing out an opinion who probably doesn't really know me, but even more importantly, they'll be dead too soon. We're all going to
Right.
be dead soon.
Right. It
And
really,
the only thing that matters is the Lord and what he thinks of you when you meet him in the hereafter.
it really doesn't matter. I hear every time I hear about a celebrity dying or somebody I admired, even people I cared about and prayed about, and it's like they're dead, you know, they're dead now. So what did their life mean if it didn't serve the Lord?
Right.
It's really very profound, and it strikes me really deeply every time I hear about somebody dying that everybody knows, and maybe they were liked and maybe they weren't, but what are they doing now? They're dead.
Michael Jackson has been dead for 15 years this month. In the month that he died in the month of June, about this time. I can't remember exactly what the day was. And here we are, 50. I feel like that was yesterday. I
Yeah,
remember exactly where I was when I heard it. Kind of like there are people living on this earth right now who remember exactly where they were when the announcement that John F. Kennedy had been shot,
I remember. Yeah,
or Martin Luther King, or
yeah,
I remember where I was when I heard that Reagan got shot, and he survived that, but he's long gone now. He died in 2004 after about 10 years with Alzheimer's. I mean, and it's a drop in the bucket. And pretty
wow,
soon he will be. I remember my mother died when she was 40 years old. I was 8. And I remember when we passed the mark where she's now been gone longer than she's been alive.
yeah,
Um, yeah. So 2019 would have marked the 40th anniversary of her death. So the next day, if I can speak this way, she's now been dead longer than she was gone. And all of us will be dead longer than we're gone.
yeah, that's right.
And I know that's not profound, but it is. It should mark you. What are you doing in this little dash of time between your birthday and your death day? What is
Lord,
it?
Lord Jesus, what do you want me to do today?
Yeah,
Yeah, rather than please bless me, Lord, with what I want to do. What are you doing already that I can be a part of?
sure.
That's a better prayer, I think.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So
All right. Well, let's.
you have something special for us.
I do, Travis.
Part two. Part two.
Part two on near death experiences. We started on this last week. This is Travis and Ross with notes on, giving you the introduction in the middle of the show here. And we try to do Christ on Purpose every week for you. And we have this near death experience slides that we started. I did this lesson at my church, Travis. That's why I have this just bulletproof, amazing PowerPoint. Um, and I'm clicking on it and nothing's happening. So can you bring it up?
I can. Let me see.
There
Boom.
we go. Okay, near death experiences in the Christian faith. Last week we talked about a definition for near death experiences. Let's look at that. Um, an unusual experience taking place on the brink of death and recounted by a person after recovery, typically an out of body experience or a vision of a tunnel of light. Now, the reason, like we talked about last week, but let's review for a moment, that these are so compelling from a Christian standpoint is that there are some of these near death experiences, Travis, that are verifiable, veridical. The people have these experiences, and part of their experience was that they claim to experience often the surgery, the operating room that they float up out of their body out of, or maybe up on the roof. Some guy went like a continent away and saw his parents
Right.
eating dinner, for crying out loud, and was able to recount what they were eating for dinner, and that was verifiable. But to me, and I think to you probably too, we talked about this last week, the fact that you can float up out of your body and experience from that point of view, from that angle, something that you couldn't have seen even if you were awake, fully conscious with your eyes open on the operating table, is just, in my mind, irrefutable evidence that there is a soul to us. There is an immaterial part to us. That that's the only way I can see to account for this. I've really struggled. If I was a materialist, how would I answer this? I try to be honest about, these kind of things with myself. Is there a good response to this? I really can't think of one. Would you agree with that?
No, I mean, I do agree with that wholeheartedly. Absolutely.
And there's been thousands of these now, Travis. There's even a peer-reviewed journal dedicated to near-death experiences. So this is a thing. There's a lot of books out there. Raymond Moody wrote Life After Life. I've got a couple of books here that I can recommend. This one is the best one I've read. It's called The Science of Near-Death Experiences. It's a anthology, bunch of different articles by different people, edited by John Hagen. That's really good. But I think that if you're debating somebody who is a naturalist, who says, I just don't believe in anything I can't see, I don't think there's any angels or demons or spiritual world or God, you can whip this little fact out of your pocket and say, well, what do you do with near-death experiences? How do you answer that? And I think really the only thing they can say is they just have to say it's all bunk, that it's all made up. But there's just too many of them now. So we talked
near the end of the show last week. I brought up very briefly. I can't remember how much I developed it, but I brought up the point that even if every single one of them is bogus, you have to at least admit they're possible.
Yes.
And I mean, surely it is at least possible that these people had these genuine experiences, even if in actuality they didn't. They weren't veridical. They as they were going into their death, they had these hallucinations that went on in their mind and so forth. But if you grant the possibility of it, you must now grant that you have a soul, because my body cannot experience an out-of-body experience
by nature.
I mean, just that's obvious. So if I can have an out-of-body experience, then there's something about me that is not reducible to my body. In other words, there's something about me that is simply not my material physical body. And that just is an argument for the soul.
That's right. That's right. So we talked last week, Travis, about Pam Lowry from Atlanta. She had a surgery. She had a horrible brain aneurysm. It was huge and in the wrong place. And they did a really radical procedure where they taped her eyes and plugged her ears and actually cooled her to 60 degrees and drained all the blood from her body for an hour. She was clinically dead. And she had a near-death experience during this time where she recounted a lot of details about the surgery that she couldn't possibly have known. There's just no way to explain it. And she wound up dying at 52 or 53 of I think it was heart failure. Or anyway, I would say to people, check her out online. There's lots of stories about Pam Lowry. And then we went to this list here, Travis. Well, let's go through this again. On the one that I did for my presentation yesterday, I added mind, will, and emotion, as being a traditional way of defining the person. On your suggestion, but I wasn't able to do it here. So let's go through this list really quickly. what features remain during near-death experiences. In other words, what remains of us when we're out of body. And really, pretty much all of us, other than our ability to move a body, we are able to perceive, which is astounding when you think about the fact that our eyeballs and our optic nerves are down on the operating table.
Right.
With what apparatus are we perceiving? We're still fully conscious. We have the sound and light show that we have every morning. We have our cognitive ability. We're able to think and reason. We have our will, like you mentioned. We can still make choices. We maintain our personal identity and our sex. We're still identifiable as male or female, and we don't meld into some, single mind or something like that, like some of the Eastern religions tell us. Our personality is intact. We're still exist in one spot, seemingly. We don't, again, meld into something where we're everywhere at once. We still have our emotions, which is part of who we are. And then this is the one, Travis, that just destroys naturalism as far as I'm concerned. If someone is out of body perceiving something and they remember it and come back to into their body and are able to recount this verifiable experience, during that time between when they experienced it and when they came back into their body, where was the memory of that occurrence stored? If our memory is just in our physical body, they wouldn't. If they had a experience, they wouldn't remember it. But the fact that we even remember it means that much of our memory, maybe all of our memory, Travis, I don't know, is in our spiritual part, not just our brain.
We do have to be careful to not overstate our case. I agree with you that once you concede that these experiences are veridical, now, I mean, the moment you do, the naturalism is destroyed. But one of the arguments that naturalists might give to what you just said was, well, it's precise because we can remember it that they aren't veridical. In other words, they're going to try to say memory is stored in the brain. So how can the soul access it? So you go round and round on that.
Well, I would say in answer to that I think they're looking at the evidence backwards.
You first established that the veridicality of the near-death experience. So that's why my stages in the argument is to say first, okay, let's look at a few of these experiences. Okay, it seems to me that this is at least possible. And
right.
So once you grant that it's possible, you cannot be a naturalist anymore, because there's something about you that just is not your body. It's not reducible to the material body that makes you you.
Right.
And I think the question now is, why is it that someone outside of the body can create a memory, something they remember when they enter back into the body? And the answer, I think, is hylomorphism. I think that's the best way to understand dualism. Hylomorphism is the view that human being, everything that is in this natural world, this is true of, but to focus on humans, we are a composition of form and matter. Your form speaks more to your essence, and your matter, of course, is the instantiation of that essence.
Mm-hmm.
And Aristotle argued that the forms are not these universals that are stuck in some eternal realm, of which you and I are exemplifications. Aristotle would say, instead of Plato, he would say the form just is in the individual. So in terms of natural substances like you and me, our forms can't exist without matter. Now, Aristotle is going to say that when the matter dies, the form dies. But Aquinas is going to make a few moves. He's going to use all of Aristotle's assumptions and still demonstrate that even though there's a union, a genuine union of form and matter in every human being, there's no complete identity of that, so that the form can survive the death of the body. And the reason this is a really good way to look at the soul is because the soul is not a complete substance in itself that's sort of mashed with the body. Because the question A is what tethers them together.
Right.
Second of all, how does the soul interact with the brain? How does this purely immaterial, different substance find itself in the body and then use the body? And then why is it so affected when the body is damaged? Aristotle would say, and Thomas Aquinas would say, that the form, or the soul, if you will, is the active principle in the body. The soul is the form of the body. And I think as a traducianist, that just makes hylomorphism even more plausible, because on traducianism, all of what I am is inherited to me by my parents. So all the genetic material, for example, was given to me by my parents. And so the moment that I come into existence, in virtue of being the son of my mother and father, all of what I am comes into being. In other words, God doesn't infuse the soul into the body. Rather, it's the sexual union of the parents and the fertilization of the egg that creates all of what I am, body and soul.
Do you think there's a materialist way to look at this? And what I mean by that is, why is it that only biological systems, human systems, biological systems, have souls? Why can't a soul attach itself to a tree or a rock or a planet?
The Aristotelian would say that every living thing has soul. So there is vegetative soul, and that's what exists in the plant kingdom. Then there's animal soul, that it has the power of self-movement, that is found in the animal kingdom. And then there is rational soul, which you and I possess.
So give me a term that we can use for the soul. I guess we would call it a human soul, that soul which is unique to human beings.
That's right. So the essential characteristic of every human, the one essential attribute that we all share, is rational animality. So we are rational animals. That's what Aristotle would say. And I would just add to it, we also have the marks of free will and emotion, which makes us person. So I like to say that we are ratio, volitio, emotional animality. And that is a three-part, that three-part constitution makes us what we are, human beings.
Is self-awareness in there somewhere?
Yeah. So insofar it says I am a person, my rationality encompasses consciousness, which allows me to be self-aware. Animals have sense consciousness, but they don't have full self-consciousness.
That's right.
And so because I can think, and because I have an intellect that can be about other things as well as introspective and that sort of thing, my intellect, while it is obviously united to the brain, is not properly grounded in it, which is why when the brain dies, my intellect can survive.
So
Whereas when an animal dies, their thinking is properly grounded in sense. So they have sense awareness, but not full self-awareness. And therefore, their thinking, quote unquote, is properly grounded in matter, which is why we have no guarantee that when our precious animals die, their souls, we have no guarantee that their souls survive. Maybe there's an act of grace on God's part to make heaven even more fulfilling by letting, our animals, meet us at the pearly gates or whatever. But I'm just saying that there's no guarantee on hylomorphism that animals survive their deaths.
Some people, Travis, in the reading that I've done, have in their near-death experiences seen animals in the afterlife that they experience.
Sure.
So it's a possibility. I know Hugh Ross says no, there's no animals in heaven, but
Right.
I don't. I don't.
I will say, as a hylomorphist, I don't have a position on the matter.
Yeah.
I'm not going to say no, but I'm certainly not going to say yes. I think that if it is true, it's only true because God acted in a special way to preserve the soul of the animal.
So maybe a question we can leave because we're out of time
As
already.
usual.
But what is it about the human form that allows a human soul to, what's the right word, connect with it, interact with it, join with it, where it can't, a human soul cannot interact, join, or connect with any other entity?
Well, that's a great question to leave off.
Yeah.
And so thank you all. We'll be back to try to answer that question next week.
We thought we'd wrap this up, but we're going to do one more on near-death experiences, Travis.
That's right. We are.
Okay. Great to see you, brother.
Good to see you, man. Bye-bye.